Assassin's Promise by Thomas Woodward. Chapter 103. Rasham saw the outsiders as they approached tentatively, warily. He smiled. Most of the merchants did not know what to make of the unlikely group of women. In truth, one had the markings of a warrior, the other was barely a slip of a girl, and they traveled with a young mother and her children. Why did they travel alone in these parts, so far from everything? Perhaps their men had left them to fend for themselves. Cocking an eye at the taller blonde woman, his gaze lingered a moment. He saw the strange signs, but did not believe them at first. What was a daughter of the leopard doing among the others, hundreds of miles from her people? He covered his shock in silence, waiting for the other merchants to speak. And the girl, she had gained the blessing of the three-eyed god. Their god was often cruel and brutal. Any favor that was gained was earned. By their customs, they must show the newcomers great respect. He would not break custom. To do so was anathema. Their people's lives were dictated by custom, from birth to final breath, and he had seen nothing in his years that would change that. Gavis moved softly past Rasham, aloof in his silk slippers. Heavy rugs had created a barrier from the burning sand beneath their feet. An immense area had been covered, and ran the length of the entire merchant caravan. Merchant shops had been set up, gnarled and young men making deals with whispered words in the shades of their tents. Servants in gossamer-thin cloths moved to their every whim. Powerful noblewomen moved about with dozens of slaves in tow. They hoped to barter among their brethren here at the great gathering. Dark-haired men bowed low in colorfully painted garb as Gavis and the small grouping of other merchants passed them. Rasham had earned much prestige in the past year. Soon he would formally seek Gavis's favor. The powerful contracts the older man could impose would be seen to all as a great boon, should Rasham succeed in persuading him. Gavis held the strings of power as head of the Merchant Council's local sect. It was customary to meet with the travelers, and then offer them refreshment and a place to rest. However, outsiders were not often allowed within the great meeting of merchants held every 5 years. Their choice of meeting place was remote, partially intended to dissuade common travelers from stumbling upon them. The great meeting was used for merchants to exchange wares, trade secrets, and information that could be sold at a high price. Low-ranking merchants who hoped to prove themselves would make entreaties to masters of the craft, in hopes of gaining their guidance and the reputation that would come with association to their name. No merchant could sell wares without a contract, and these were jealously guarded by the Merchant Council. Those who broke this law and chose to sell without the approval of the council risked retribution. A good portion of the wealth the council amassed went toward the end of keeping their power and dominance in trade throughout the continent. Spies were sometimes caught, those who had been paid large sums of money to break into the secret meetings of the council. Those that had been discovered were tortured until their source could be identified. Only then would the Ameni servants be loosed upon their unsuspecting foes. Servant was an odd term. In reality, the Ameni were bound tighter to the Merchant Council than slaves. Rasham wanted to know what drove these women to approach the great gathering. Perhaps they were just unlucky, in the wrong place at the wrong time. It would matter little. By the rights of their ancestors, they had been presented a slim chance at life, rather than being killed outright. Over the years, the locals had learned to stay far away from the multicolored gathering of tents in the desert. One of their members, Jassim, had never arrived. His arrival had been anticipated. He had made arrangements to bring a caravan heading for the far coast with him. Could these be the unfortunate passengers? Rasham wondered what could have happened to the old merchant himself. Likely the man had met his end. Had these women ended his life? Could it be treachery? Perhaps Jassim's caravan had met with disaster. Rasham would pry the information from these women. Making a low bow, Rasham held one hand to his lips, as was customary. Honored guests, we welcome you to our gathering of tents. Please come with us. We will make arrangements for a pavilion to be erected to provide shade and rest for you. We will send refreshments, and men or women, if they are to your liking, to calm your appetites as you relax. Come." Gavis watched with a discerning eye as Rasham, most junior of the group of merchants, made the proclamation for all those in attendance. The young girl met Rasham's eye and held it for a moment. He waited, anxious. The three-eyed god had bestowed his blessing upon this one. Why? "Good sir, I am pleased to make your acquaintance." Millie dipped a curtsy, trying her best to sound polished. The blonde woman stood heads taller than the girl, and yet she just waited. She voiced no greeting, or gave any appearance that she had any intention of doing so. Her eyes were hard on Rasham and his companions. The wagon trailed more than 50 paces behind the two women. The other woman led the horses with one hand while clucking at her children, keeping them from the path of the clopping hooves. Rasham felt the weight of the silence that hung in the air. The pair was odd, so different they were. Quietly clearing his throat and wetting his lips, he held out his arm, pointing to an area that was already being cleared out by servants to place their tent. "Sir, our caravan was lost," Millie said. "Our driver, Jess, spoke of a meeting point with a great merchant caravan. He would be here now if he were still alive." Millie spoke, deathly pallor stilling her words further. "Please, sir, we wish to make our way to the far coast. I beg of you to grant us the means to cross the great desert." Falling silent, Millie looked down, waiting. "It will be as you say," Gavis said. "You have gained much honor in our eyes. None in 100 years has gained the blessing of the three-eyed god. He does not grant his favor lightly." Gavis spoke in clear tones that belied his age. He held a stout, beautifully carved walking stick in his hand. He moved with a youthful vigor as he spoke, gaining momentum with each word. "Please, let us welcome you for a night and a day, as is customary by our traditions before you leave us. I only wish to speak with you, child, after you have taken your leisure. Come to the great spiral tent tomorrow as the sun reaches its zenith, and I will share with you something precious. I will tell you the story of our people. You have earned that much."